Hi, third grade. I have your math instructional video for today. We're going to do lesson 114, which is simplifying fractions and adding and subtracting mixed numbers. So it says, write an answer that contains a fraction in the simplest form possible. So this is going to build on one of our earlier lessons from this week with reducing fractions to the simplest possible form when we want to figure out what the GCF or the greatest common factor is. That's the lesson that we're going to be thinking about when we're reducing to the smallest form, because if you don't reduce your fractions and list them in the simplest form, it's not going to be marked correct on your worksheet today. And then add and subtract fractions and mixed numbers with common denominators. Now, this is something that you guys are very good at. The only thing that we're adding in is now there's going to be mixed numbers too. So you are really good at adding and subtracting fractions with common denominators. The only thing that's going to be different is we're going to be throwing in some mixed numbers, and that complicates it a little bit. But I think because you guys are already so good at adding and subtracting the fractions already, I think that you'll be okay once we go over things a little bit more. Now, your worksheet for this, I'm not a big fan of how they explain things. I think they're leaving out something very, very important, and I'll get to that in just a moment. So this is what your lesson 114 worksheet looks like in your Learn at Home packet. It says simplifying fraction answers. Change an improper fraction answer to a mixed number. And that was a previous lesson too. We just have to keep in mind that the line that divides the numerator and the denominator is a division bar, and technically it's a division problem. So if it's a top-heavy fraction or an improper fraction, meaning the numerator is larger than the denominator, you need to divide the numerator by the denominator to figure out what the whole number in your mixed number will be, and then your remainder is what your new numerator is. But we'll go over some practice to help refresh your memory. It says always reduce fraction answers if possible. Some of these you can reduce. Some of your answers will already be in simplest form. That's going to be on you guys to figure out. An example would be like, let's say if we had 1/8 plus 3/8, and then our answer was 4/8. If you put 4/8 down, you would not get that marked correct, because 1/8 plus 3/8 is 4/8, but the directions say to reduce. So you need to reduce that to 1/2. 1/2 would be the correct answer for that, because that's the smallest possible numerator and denominator that still tell that equivalent fraction. Now, this is the direction that I am not a fan of. I don't think they're very clear on this in the instructions, and I don't think they illustrate it well with the example that they chose. So I'm going to be doing something different with you guys. It says sometimes it helps to break apart a mixed number answer and change the improper fraction to another mixed number. And the example that they give here, they're not even doing that step in this example. So we're going to go through the example because it'll be the first time that we're adding or subtracting with mixed numbers and fractions. But then I'm going to do a different example to show you what they mean by break apart. And I don't think about using those words. I think about it as you can't subtract a number from a smaller number. So you need to do some regrouping. It's technically regrouping or borrowing, but it's different when you're looking at it as a mixed number and a fraction than just ones, tens, hundreds. It's the same idea, it just looks different. So we'll go over that after we go over the example. So the example that they gave you is 3 4/5. My hand frame, yeah. 3 4/5 plus 4 3/5. Make sure you pay attention to what operation you're doing, because you have both addition and subtraction problems on this assignment. And if you look at number 1 and 2, those aren't mixed numbers yet. You might have mixed numbers for your answer, but you're adding fractions. And I like to add and subtract my fractions in a horizontal number sentence when they're only fractions. But when you are doing mixed numbers, the way my brain works, I think it's easier to do it set up vertically. And that's how they do that problem in your worksheet as well. So I have 3 4/5 plus 4 3/5. Now, if we were doing this in the book tells you to worry about the whole number first, and I don't like that direction either. I say look at your fractions first. These are common denominators. So I know that at least to start out, my denominator is not going to change. Once I figured out this whole problem, then I can look at it and see if I need to reduce my problem. Right now, I don't need to worry about that. I'm going to put my 5 down for my denominator right away. And I'm going to say, oh, I already used those numbers. Now I'm going to look at my numerators. 4 plus 3 is 7. And 3 plus 4 is 7. Now, I have a top-heavy fraction, 7/5. So actually, I want to look at this and figure out how I can reduce this, 7/5. So what I would do is 7 divided by 5. 5 goes into 7 one time. 1 times 5 is 5. Remember, my denominator is not going to change. 7 minus 5 is 2. My remainder becomes my new numerator. So 7/5 is the same as 1 2/5. So I'm going to reduce this fraction because I don't want top-heavy fractions and mixed numbers. So 1 2/5. 7 plus 1 2/5 is going to be 8 2/5. That's going to be my final answer, and that's what they tell you in the example. Let's say, though, that if my numerator had been, or if my denominator had been fourths, if it had been fourths instead, and my answer was 8 2/4, I would need to reduce that. And I wouldn't be reducing my mixed number at all. I'd only reduce the fraction. It'd be 8.5 instead of 8 2/4. Now, I'm going to show you another problem because I think it's really important that you see an example of subtracting a fraction from a smaller fraction and how we do the regrouping when it's a mixed number and it's not just a place value where everything's going up by tenths. It's a little bit of a different concept, but it's very, very similar to borrowing. And I think we need to illustrate that. So we're going to do two 3/7 minus 1 6/7. So this is why I say you should look at your fraction first, because otherwise I'd say, oh, 2 minus 1 is 1, and I wouldn't have anything to regroup with. Same as any other subtraction problem, we want to work from the right over to the left. So my denominator is not going to change. It's going to be 7ths. I'm going to put that down there right away. Now I'm looking at my numerator. 3 minus 6. I can't take 6 away from 3. 3 is a smaller number, so I need to regroup. Now, if we were regrouping with standard, ones, tens, hundreds, I would just change this to a 1, which is what we will do, but then I would just add a 1 in front of that 3 because we know whenever we're regrouping, it's by tens. Not the case when it's fractions and mixed numbers. I'm not going to be giving 10 to this 3. I'm going to be giving 7 to this 3. So, right, because remember, 7/7 would be equal to 1. So it's 1 and 7/7 would be another way to write 2. So I'm going to still take away from that 2. Now that's a 1. And now I'm going to give 7 to this 3. So my new numerator is actually going to be 10, not 13. Now I'm looking at 10 minus 6. 10 minus 6 is 4. 1 minus 1 is 0. So I don't have a whole number in my answer. It's just going to be 4/7. We will try one more. 6 1/4 plus 3 3/4 My denominator does not change. Looking at my numerators, paying attention to my operation, 1 plus 3 is 4. 6 plus 3 is 9. But this is not the simplest form. 4 over 4, whenever my numerator and my denominator are the same number, it's the same thing as a 1. So technically it should be 9 plus 1. My answer should be 10. The most important things for you to remember on this worksheet is double check your operations. Make sure you are paying attention to whether you're supposed to be adding or supposed to be subtracting. And then also, if you need to do any regrouping, making sure that you are looking at the denominator, you're not just adding in 10. If the denominator is 10, then you'd add 10. If the denominator is 5, you only add 5 to your numerator. If the denominator is 12, you add 12 to your numerator. So those are the things that you need to pay the biggest attention to. There's only 8 problems on this worksheet. Double check your operations so that you're adding where you're supposed to add, you're subtracting where you're supposed to subtract. Regrouping means you look at the denominator for what to add to the numerator, and then make sure you're simplifying because your answers need to be given in the simplest form possible. I helped you out a little bit on the Google Sheet. I only gave you the boxes that you needed. So if there's one large box and 2 smaller boxes, that means that you are going to need a whole number and a mixed number, or in a fraction. It's going to be a mixed number. If I only give you one big box, your answer is a whole number. If I only give you 2 small boxes, your answer is a fraction with no mixed number attached. So that should hopefully help you out if you're doing it electronically.